Yeah, thank you, Dominique, for your speech too. It's very interesting, and as you know, it's on the flowing. It's a projection of the theme today, the future of humans in the assessment of language. So, as Dominique said, we now are going to open sessions, and we will start opening sessions with him too. So he will not have enough time to take a rest. So I'm going to introduce Dominique. As he said soon, he is the head of the development of scientific development of Le Français des Affaires, which is a part of education division in the CCIP, and he is also he joined the Français des Affaires since 2005 to coordinate, how can I say, the electronic format of the test d'évaluation of Français, and he is now conducting some works in psychometrics and machine learning, so on and so forth, like writing written expressions automatically. So we introduced Dominique Casanova in order to present us the first session with the theme of technology in language assessment. Have you already opened the Pandora's box? Dominique, welcome. Again.
Hello again. And I'm also very pleased to work with Alassane and the rest of the teams of Le Français des Affaires. It's a really good place to be. Since we have some minutes ahead the schedule, maybe I'll talk a little about me. As Alassane said, I joined the CCIP in 2005, and at the time they were looking for a plurilingual person who was able to speak both to the teams of Le Français des Affaires, pedagogical team, administrative team, and to computer scientists who are developing our electronic version of the TEF, ETEF. And then I continue to develop my plurilingualisms by looking at psychometrics and then transferring psychometric competence in the Chambre de Commerce et d'Industrie de Paris. So I'm not maybe very at ease with human languages, but I have an experience with plurilingualism. So today we will make this presentation with, we'll also present you our really new realization, which is a chatbot. And it's an adaptive chatbot, because if you speak to this chatbot with a French accent, it will answer with a French accent. So let's start. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Dominique.
It works. As I was saying, the first time I'm using you in a meeting.
Do you mean a political meeting?
No. But by the way, what do you think of general elections? You know, this idea of asking people to vote for someone and giving the same weight to people, to adult peoples, without regard to their gender, nor their cultural background, or their educational background, or their professional activity. Isn't it strange? Wouldn't it be more efficient to have an AI algorithm who would study the programs of the candidates, then temperament, will see what problems the country is facing and what may be tomorrow's problems, and then select the best matching candidate to be a leader? What do you think of it?
Well, it sounds rational to me. It would be cost-effective, quick, and would probably give better results. But given my data, you will have hard times getting it accepted, especially in France.
Yeah, probably. Our societies wouldn't accept it. Not yet, I mean.
But Margaret Thatcher said there is no such thing as society.
Wow, what a reference. Well, I was in disagreement with her when she said that, but it may come. In fact, with the virtualization of our activities, social media, teleworking, video conferencing, I feel we are more and more isolated, and we are loosening the links between humans. So it may have impact on our societies, and they may evolve towards something different.
And is it what you want to talk about?
Yes, but at the level of language assessment. You know, technology also impacts the way we communicate and the way we do testing. And sometimes I fear that we have already opened the Pandora's box.
I don't understand. What is the link between the use of technology and Pandora's box?
Oh, it's an image. We call it a metaphor. In fact, I'm afraid that for the sake of efficiency, we introduce technical advances in language testing which may result in unwanted effects, like Pandora, who released curses on the mankind when opening a box.
Oh, I see. But what kind of issues might be raised by the use of technology?
Well, I think it may contribute to this isolation of people and the reduction of our social experiences. You know, traditional ways of delivering exams are social experience. The candidate needs to contact the test center, to book for a seat, then he goes to take his test in the test center. There is a proctor he can speak with. There are also people in the test center who can answer his questions. He probably has an interlocutor for the speaking part of the test. So it's a social experience, both in the target language but also in the mother tongue of the candidate. So traditional ways of delivering exams are social experiences. But now technology gives us the opportunity to provide a very efficient, timely testing service, where the candidate has no human in front of him. He can stay at his home, go on the website to get informed about the test, register for the test, take the test proctored by an AI system, and having a speaking test but just speaking to his computer, and can be automatically rated, and he can get his result in the same day. So it's very efficient. What do you think of it?
It seems great, doesn't it?
What about the social experience? Everything from home, avoid social interactions. Don't we like us, humans, as we are? What society will result from this tendency? Look at this conference. Half of ALTE members decided to come to Paris to follow this conference. Why? Probably because they think that they will have a richer experience coming to Paris, meeting each other, discussing, not only looking at presentation, but also discussing during coffee breaks, exchange ideas, have following questions. It's definitely not the same thing. And it probably helps making part of the community.
But offering a hybrid event gives the opportunity to reach new participants who maybe wouldn't have had the possibility to come to Paris. Don't you think?
Yes, definitely. In fact, technology can be used as a supplement to make the service more available and enhance its quality, but not necessarily in replacement of the current way of doing things. Because you must have a similar experience in both settings. That should be the aim. For example, making distant participation available for test takers, but with human interlocutors. Let's go back to the CFR, which is the basis of many language assessment in Europe. The CFR popularized the action-oriented approach and the view of users and learners of language primarily as social agents. Isn't there a contradiction here? Language testing services in isolations versus user of the language as social agents?
But do you think that all learners or test takers want to behave like social agents and have a social experience in learning or being tested?
Well, it depends, of course. It depends on why they are learning the language and why they are taking the test. It depends on what we claim that we teach them and what we claim to assess. It also depends on the motivation behind the design and the use of the language course or the language test. Take a language course aimed at migrants and financed by the government. It is likely that this course will have been designed in order to enable them to act as social agents in their social sphere, their professional environment, even in their exchanges, dealings with administration. So it would be appropriate if the language test puts them in situations where they have to act as social agents, even if they are not interested in behaving like it.
Okay, but you could simulate such situations, couldn't you?
Yeah, of course. But simulation is often a crude representation of reality. Perhaps some members of ALTE will know what it is. In fact, it's the first video game for table tennis. And humans are so fascinated by scientific and technological advances that they may upload very basic realizations. And this video game was very popular. Now look at this one. It is from 2006. It's much more realistic. But being good at table tennis game doesn't mean that you will be good at playing tennis as a sport. So simulation of social interaction may be a bit limited too. And if you don't even offer people the opportunity of real social interactions, in learning, in testing, you reinforce this tendency toward isolation. Take a look at the social media, for instance, the way people speak in the social media. They're not directly confronted to their interlocutor, so it's more direct, less nuanced. They don't see the impact of what they say on the interlocutor, so they don't negotiate the meaning of what they say. They don't phrase differently in order not to offend the interlocutor, for instance, or to give additional arguments about what they're saying. What do you think of it?
I see your point. So I imagine that you campaign for interactional situations in language testing?
Well, as always, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on what you claim you are assessing and on the use that is made of the results of your test. So you should be very clear towards stakeholders. And there should be coherence between what your test is aimed to assess, what it does assess, and how the results are extrapolated and used by external organizations. But generally speaking, yes, I think oral interaction is an important language activity at the heart of communication between humans, because it's a direct and efficient way to socialize. In everyday life, you generally don't ask someone, are you proficient in English? No, usually you rather say, do you speak English? Parlez-vous français? Parlez italiano? Hablas español? Sprichst du Deutsch?
That's right.
And according to the companion volume, both the CEFR descriptive scheme and action-oriented approach put the co-construction of meaning through interaction at the center of the learning and teaching process. And notably in a professional context, my conviction is that speaking is a key. Notably speaking in interaction with someone. And you don't communicate only with words. François Renaud will discuss right after me this more in detail in his presentation. So there is another problem. Difference between humans and machines tomorrow is that the former will be more able to negotiate meaning with interlocutors, decode non-verbal communication, and show empathy, for instance. So these skills are probably the ones you need to develop for tomorrow when learning a language in order to differentiate from computers, because they will be able to do other things. They will be able to write phrases, even to speak, but based on models which don't take into account the social interaction.
So you are really in favor of semi-direct tests, are you? You are not.
Well, it depends, as always, on the context, what you claim to your test assesses, how the results of your tests are interpreted, and what they are used for. But as Dr. Fumio Nakatsuhara and Dr. Lin Mei put in their abstract, despite its practical advantages, a semi-direct test which does not permit reciprocal interaction between speakers is limited in the range of constructs it can assess. But they will also show us how the use of computer-delivered speaking tests can tap into a wide range of communicative language ability.
Interesting. And do they use a chatbot for that?
No. Well, an interesting aspect of their work is that they use relatively simple digital technology to reach their goal. So it's accessible.
But why not consider using a chatbot like me?
Because you only exist in my dreams. It will be very difficult to conceive. It will be a super research project, of course, but it will be very expensive. But you can have a look at this work of Gary Hockey and Evgeny Shukarev-Hudilainen. In fact, they developed a spoken dialogue system to act in place of a peer candidate in oral interaction. So they can rate interactional competence in a more standardized way.
So chatbots will be more and more used in the future, won't they?
Well, probably, and it raises ethical issues. The French National Digital Ethics Pilot Committee recently issued an opinion on chatbots. Part of this opinion concerns the interplay between humans and chatbots in everyday life. And there are several passages related to language. For instance, the use of chatbots with a habituation effect can have a lasting impact on human language and on the evolution of behavioral norms. But Nick Saville will play more specifically about the interplay between humans and machines. And here, I'm playing the sad clown, but he will probably give us a more optimistic point of view. But speaking of ethics, there is the most obvious topic, which is remote proctoring.
What? This big brother stuff? Isn't there a proctor in classical exam rooms?
Stop being binary, please. You can do more than that.
Okay. I will use my qubits then and start seeing things like Schrödinger.
Did you try metaphor here?
Yes. Was it good?
Well, it doesn't really work with me because, you know, in order to understand your metaphor, we should rely on a common background. And I'm not a specialist in electronics.
Oh, okay. Sorry. In fact, it was more quantum theory than electronics.
Never mind, never mind. So, regarding remote proctoring, it's not a trivial issue. Of course, there are some situations where it can be very useful. If your candidate is isolated somewhere, if there is a lockdown, if your candidate is unable to move, it helps you give access to your service. In such cases, it's filling a gap, but it shouldn't be an easy way out. You shouldn't consider it like a normal way of taking the test. Why? Because it's intrusive. You enter the test taker's private sphere, and it may pave the way for other violations of privacy. In this document, you have a framework to think about remote proctoring and the different questions that it raises concerning ethics. Because I don't want to pave the way for a surveillance society. And in fact, there are different ways of doing remote proctoring. You can have human invigilators or AI algorithm to report suspect behaviors, recording test takers and their screen and flagging suspicious passages. And of course, there are questions of data protection here. And the regulations may differ in different countries, so it's not an easy issue.
On the other hand, a remote proctoring algorithm is perhaps more effective than human proctoring, be it on site or remotely. And there is no risk of corruption.
Yeah, it's not a trivial issue, indeed. But in fact, there is some sort of contradiction. You don't want to do too much because of respect of the candidates, GDPR, things like that. But if you do not enough with remote proctoring, you may find issues. Like this is an article from 2 days ago. It happened in a concours, a test for entrance in business schools. And they did use remote proctoring, but since they were afraid of the reaction of candidates, they used a slight remote proctoring, and there was a lot of fraud. So if you do want to use remote proctoring, you need to assure that, yes, your test is really protected. So you have to see how is the room as a candidate, be sure that there is nobody in the room, so he shows you all his room. So in turn, you get into his privacy sphere. So that's complicated. And we should not just think in terms of efficiency. We should be able to justify the relevance of introducing such technologies in our tests. What do you think of it?
If I get you well, it's not your technology that is the problem, but rather the use that can be made of it by humans.
Yes, indeed. We should be careful when using such technologies. And we should not overestimate its possibilities, like for simulations, for instance. Like for rating, too. Do you know Marcel Corré? It's a French linguist who worked in the domain of natural language processing. And in his last book, he writes, "Computers do not understand anything about our languages, which does not prevent them from rendering us services, from helping us in the accomplishment of various and varied tasks relating to our language productions." So, how computers could assess the content of an essay if they don't understand what is written, the meaning of what is written? Here are two interesting publications from Education Testing Service. I quote one of the two. "In fact, Now, the fact that machine cannot really understand a written document, does not read as a human would read, and cannot interpret its meaning, implies that we cannot envisage the replacement of the human by the machine, whose score cannot be interpreted in the same way, since the computer does not have access to the meaning unlike the human evaluator.
But automatic essay scoring has been a very dynamic field since the last decade.
Yes, indeed, and can play a part in the rating. But it would be unwise to delegate the full responsibility of the scoring to it. It can be used to collect relevant data, but it will miss some aspects of the writing that humans will consider important and evaluate. So probably you should combine both. And the responsibility of the decision should stay at the human level, having in mind that it has an impact on the candidate and the society.
Like for killer drones?
Oh, yes, what an analogy. And there is another issue. When you made, some years ago, not so far, automated essay scoring models, it was uncrafted models. You knew what features you took into account, what you were looking for as an information for scoring. But now you have neural networks and transformers, and it becomes more and more obscure, even to linguists. It's very technical. But Thomas François, who will make a presentation after lunch, entitled Automated Essay Scoring, Where Do You Stand and Where Are We Going, may mitigate my point of view.
But humans have long proved to vary in their ratings, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. And this is the reason why we cannot ignore the support of technology. But we should not only rely on technology to take decisions. Or if we decide to rate only what the machines can rate, we should be very explicit and tell it clearly claim that, and describe what they rate, if we are able to describe it, so the results can be used properly. But we'll probably give the feeling that a more complex use of languages is useless. That what matters in language learning is what can be understood or evaluated by the computers. Is it wishable? What about poetry? What about rhetorical figures? Other creative use of language that computers until now are not able to take into account. They are part of the social use of the language.
I see. So I think you have the same reservations regarding learning-oriented language assessment.
Yes, indeed. In fact, there are different things I'd like to say about learning-oriented assessment. First, it's a nice concept. Its primary purpose is to promote learning. And maybe it's something that we have stepped a bit aside since our tests are used for selecting people to get into countries, but not closely connected to the learning they can have. So yes, I think it's important. And I'm really impatient to hear Eric Vaux's presentation on supporting role of technology in learning-oriented assessment. Nevertheless, behind the concept, there is a concern for effectiveness. And maybe it should be handled with care, notably when we speak of children. I'm okay to use computers for supporting collaborative and independent tasks and enhancing learner engagement. But maybe more cautious regarding provided and appropriate timely feedback. It depends on what feedback we talk of, the type of feedback. But if it's a judgmental one, it implies an affective reaction of the children. So should we delegate this responsibility to a computer? And learning is also exploration and socialization. We shouldn't prevent learners from stepping aside from time to time and make choices based on social or emotional motivations, not only logical reasons. The use of technology should help pave the way, pave the learning path, but this path shouldn't be bordered by a wire. And personalization of learning paths mustn't lead to isolation of the learner. We should keep language learning social.
I'm a bit puzzled. You look reluctant to use new technological possibilities in language testing, but you admit that they may help. So, what is your stand?
Well, technology proved to be useful during COVID, for instance, but the COVID crisis should not be the pretext for massive and unreasoned use of technology. We should take advantage of it, of course, but also weigh the immediate and long-term consequences of its use. It probably should be used as a supplement, not necessarily in replacement of our current systems. In fact, I advocate for a critical use of these possibilities, with a reflection on the impacts they may have on society. And not replacing humans by machines, by combining their strengths to offer a better service.
Hand in hand, united for better and for worse.
Well, for better, I hope. But it was a nice metaphor. Congratulations.
I learn quickly, don't I?
Yeah, and sometimes it scares me. Anne de Creton.